The devil as a character, I think most of us that lives in a Western Christian culture has some kind of image of in our head. Just like back in the medieval days, when the entertainment was tall tales and stories, our modern storytelling is full of versions of him. We have him portrayed as the handsome, charming man like Lucifer Morningstar in the TV series Lucifer, a sexy, more seasoned man like Al Pacino in The Devil's Advocate,
Call me Dad.
the horny, lustful Jack Nicholson in Witches of Eastwick, and a red-skinned cloven beast with horns as Tim Curry does in Legend. Most of the Christian world have tales about the devil, and Scandinavia is no exception. Here he shows up in the folklore both as tall tales and warning tales, and sometimes he even takes the role that other folklore beings have. Most of these stories can be found in many other variations in the rest of the Christian world, and as with many stories about the supernatural beings, sometimes the head figure of the tale is changed from one being to another, depending on where it is told and by whom. The tales where the devil got his place was often told as warnings example about people doing things they should not do if they were a good Christian. But there was also a bunch of tales about how some smart lad or lass fooled the devil. Some of these might not have been told with the expectancy to be believed by everyone, but it was told tales in entertainment. It's a bit like some of our modern myths, like that one about how someone is walking into a bar, get drugged and wake up in Thailand several days later and is missing a kidney. It is a warning, don't trust what you drink in shady places. And some will believe these stories, but some will start to pick it apart, like, how could that even be possible? And with all the stories about these things happening, it seems to be a lot of people being victim of this. So why is there never any name, anything in the news, or so on, if this really happened? Suddenly it's starting to feel a bit more like a tall tale. But you might actually not care, because the story is so good and it tickles the spine a bit. What if it was real? And people back then was not so much different from how we are today. They also wanted entertainment that tickled their spine, tales that had that little scary feeling of what if. Cloven hooves, horn, and a tail is the most common traits this being has in most stories, movies, and books. And that is also the most common way to see that you are dealing with the devil in the Swedish folklore stories. And just like in many modern versions today, the devil does wear Prada. He loves fancy clothing, and in a lot of the older folklore tales about him, he is usually dressed in a fancy suit, fancy hat, and in general looks like a rich and wealthy dandy. Sometimes he takes the shape of an animal, usually a snake, a horse, or a dog, and this animal was always black as the night. Those stories are usually told about some evil person that had died, and during the wake or the burial of this person, that big black animal appeared, ready to take the soul back to where it belonged. These stories was told as a sort of proof that the dead person was evil, but also to explain how that person managed to be rich and wealthy. Because they got a contract with the devil, of course. They cheated. Just like with all dangerous things, the devil had many Noah names. Names that were used instead of his real name, so you didn't risk calling on him. A fun thing in the Swedish language is that almost all our swear words are different names of the devil, and most of them are old Noah names for him. We have all kinds, like fan, satan, and jävlar. These swear words are used almost exactly like the English example fuck, and are used for practically anything, both in a positive and a negative way in modern way of speaking. But they come from older Noah names of the devil. Other Noah names that we don't use so much today, neither as Noah name or swear word, is Hinhåle, Hornpär, Gammel-Erik, Skam, Den Onde. Those are very common in folklore stories though. You very, very seldom see him being called the devil, just as you almost never see the mistress of the forest being called Skogsrået. And just like when you're dealing with her, or many other beings in the supernatural folklore, knowing that you are dealing with a supernatural being is not that easy. They will use magic to turn your sight and make you see a handsome, well-dressed person that normally look like a rich person. But usually there will be something that makes someone suspicious, and if you take a closer look under the table, that's when you see a hoof or a tail sticking out. There is a story about a group of people sitting and playing cards one evening, and suddenly a stranger appears, saying that he saw the card playing through the window and asks if he can join. He is of course let in and joins the game. He doesn't seem to lose, and he is playing all the money of the poor young lads. So one do get suspicious and drop a card on the floor. When he bends down to pick it up, he noticed that the handsome new stranger has a tail sticking out of his pants. Scared as heck, this man excuses himself and goes and finds a priest to help them get rid of this devil. The priest was thought to be the safest protection against the devil, of course, since they was on God's side. In Norway and the west coast of Sweden, there was a belief that priests that had studied at a school in German town Wittenberg was particularly good at dealing with the devil. Wittenberg is an actual town in southern Germany, but in Scandinavian folklore it shows up as a sort of school of magic. That school was led by the grand big devil himself as headmaster, and the people that went to study there got a black book when they graduated, a grimoire that explained all kinds of magic. The priest that went there and graduated had better knowledge of all the evil magic and the devil, and therefore they could force the devil to do almost anything if he tried his tricks. As long as they hadn't sinned themselves, of course, because then the devil would just laugh and they had lost their power over him as a hand of God. Sometimes in these stories about the devil and the priest is even mentioned by name, and is usually an actual priest that have lived and worked as a priest in the town where the story is told. The stories are the same, but depending on which town it is told, the name of the priest is changed. Another way of exposing the devil was to watch from outside a window. There is a tale from several places about the town's priest and his daughter. The daughters wanted to have new clothes for when they were going to take the Holy Communion, and in their eager and vanity to look good, they broke the Sunday Sabbath with working on their clothes. When the priest comes home, he looks through the window into the room where his daughters are sitting, and see that the new tailor that sits on the table among them are in fact the devil, in his best clothes, but with his hoofs showing and his horns sticking out under his hat. His daughters doesn't seem to notice anything strange about their companion. They just talks and laugh like everything is in order. The priest then goes in, throw his priest cloak around their shoulders so they can see who has been working with them.
Call me Dad.
This is of course a tale about how important it is to not break the Sabbath, and also to not be vain and care more about your looks during a mass than actually listen to God's word. It is a story that could happen in any town, and that's probably why it has spread so easy. As mentioned earlier, some of the stories about the devil is ones that have been told about other supernatural beings before. A good example of that is the one about all the young people in a town that has a party in a big barn. After they danced and had a merry time for a while, a new fiddler shows up and he asks if they want him to play for them. They say yes, but that was a mistake. The dance takes off and no one can stop the dancing as long as the fiddler plays. The dancers are starting to get exhausted and the soles of the shoes is starting to wear down. But luckily another man, one that was outside to go and fetch some more drinks, sees the dancing through the window and sees that the fiddler has cloven feet and that under the hat horns are sticking out. He then runs in and cuts the string of the violin with his iron scissors and the music stops. All the dancers falling to the floor, almost dead from exhaustion, but the fiddler and his magic violin disappears in a snap. This story is told almost exactly like that, about Näcken, another folklore being that protects the water stream of a river of some kind and is luring people down in the water to drown with his music. Näcken is a pure scare monster, somewhat of a one-trick pony. He is only there to drown people and make harm, so no wonder that he and the devil easily can share the same stories. There is very little perks with dealing with Näcken, and if you do, there's always a price to pay. One of the things you can gain is that you can learn how to play a fiddle from him. This has also been told about the devil. You need to go to a 4-cross road and wait there 3 Thursdays nights in a row. The first 2, nothing will happen, but on the 3rd night, Näcken, or the devil, will appear and offer to teach you. If you do this, you will be the best fiddler there ever was. But there is one song you cannot ever play. If you do, we are back to the dancers that cannot stop. And then the fiddler cannot stop either. They will not stop dancing, and the fiddler will not stop playing until they have been worn down, so just their skulls is jumping around. The only way to stop the dance is to cut the strings of the violin. The stories about wild dances that cannot stop has been told over a big area in Europe, not just Scandinavia. And maybe there is so that these stories actually was told about the devil first, and turned into stories about Näcken when it reached Scandinavia, and then turned back into the devil again when he was established as the big evil among the folklore stories. When people are telling folk tales and folklore, they are not so careful about keeping the same being if they think that it's not what their local story listeners will believe in. The devil and the Näcken is both evil creatures that want to do harm, and since Näcken had a long-lasting rumor to be an excellent fiddler, it was a natural way to select him as the evildoer instead of the devil in some areas. The result was the same regardless, because when it came down to it, it was told as a warning. Do not dance or work on Sundays and break the Sabbath. Do not take shortcuts of learning things from magic, and do not trust well-dressed rich men that you don't know, because bad things could happen to you and to others if you did these things. I do wonder though about the 4-cross road thing. With all the buses and bus stops today, I do think that there must be thousands of people that have happened to place themselves in a 4-cross way road on a Thursday night more than 2 weeks in a row. The devil must be running his little hoofs off to make deals with all these people. Or perhaps he changed the rules, so you will only meet him if your intention are to meet him, and only if you are truly alone and truly believe. This might need some testing. Thank you so much for listening about the Scandinavian devil. And if you do want me to test out this 4-cross road thing and see if I can meet the devil, please leave a comment down below, and we'll see what I can do about it. And I also, as usual, want to remind people that I am very happy to receive some little extra money to pay for gas and other stuff with filming this. So please consider to buy me a cup of coffee on Ko-fi or becoming my patron. Until next time, stay safe and healthy. Dala tu cuerpo a la alegría, Macarena.